So, one of the top 10 reasons that people say, and remember, if I think that one of the criticisms, I'm talking about the criticisms you'd have from the fans, the fan backlash, the stuff you got from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes. As you know, I'll put up quotes from the critics. I do apologize. I'm going to put up quotes from the critics as we go along so that you can see what I'm talking about. You'll see it on the screen. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do the graphic as I'm recording right now. I'm gonna challenge these top 10 criticisms and that you find in a lot of the reviews for Batman v Superman, and also along the way show how is Civil War any different? Where I can. It's unfortunately Civil War, broadly speaking, is so forgettable to me because it's so much. If it was the first Marvel movie I'd ever seen, then I might have more time for it. But now I'm saying that it's getting a little generic now. I like what Marvel do. I like that it's making kids happy. It's always good to make kids happy. But it's just not my, I'm entertained by other things. I like that as a light-hearted thing, and I'll go to any Marvel movie that comes along. But, I like something a bit more heavy-hitting, and I think that's what Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad were. So we're going to start by trying to understand the low score. And this is the last thing I'll say before I carry on. With Batman v Superman, unlike with Suicide Squad, I kind of understood a little bit more of the criticism towards it. I understood a little bit more why a lot of people didn't understand it. I wish people would have given it another chance and gone to watch it again, because I think there was a lot there that they may have missed. I thought the reviews were nitpicking rather than actually critically engaging what the film was trying to be. So yeah, let's hopefully we'll bring out all of that as it goes along. So first we're going to talk about the editing in the movie. The editing for the movie made it difficult to understand. And was too long. And the movie was too long. Now, I'm going to take each of those points on one by one. So the editing makes the movie difficult to understand. Now, I understood this within the theatrical version of the movie, the theatrical kind of release of the movie. However, as I was watching the movie, what I realized is though the editing, and especially when you see the extended version, the director's cut, you realize, well, okay, it's not just the editing, it's that they really cut out significant bits of the movie that would have helped the audience understand. But to me, I was able to fill in the gaps when I watched the theatrical version. So I did understand the critical reception, but I still felt people were nitpicking. I mean, I remember people were saying when the film came out, they didn't understand the whole... Oh, by the way, spoilers. Massive spoilers. So that this is going to be if you haven't seen Batman v Superman, I don't understand, because you're on a comic book movie. I'm sure you've watched or you've seen the movie by now, but if you haven't seen it, there's huge spoilers in this. So in the desert scene, in the theatrical version, you didn't find out that the bodies of the terrorists in the beginning were burnt by the kind of Russian, the Russian henchmen of Lex Luthor. And so people didn't understand why everyone thought Superman was responsible for killing those people in the desert. Okay, so essentially, it skipped that very, very important part where the KG Beast, that's his name, who was the henchman of Lex Luthor, where he had burnt the bodies, and all we saw is that these terrorists had been shot by Lex Luthor's henchmen, and therefore people didn't understand why did they think Superman was responsible for the death or for the deaths of these terrorists, and they were like, it doesn't make sense. But to me, it was like easy. You fill in the gap. I almost knew that these bodies had been burnt, even by watching the theatrical version. And even if they hadn't, it was obvious that in some way, the government just assumed Superman was there. He must have been responsible. He must be somehow responsible for the tragedy that unfolded and the killing of all these terrorists who had kidnapped Lois Lane. I think that's all you really needed to understand. I didn't think there was any big thing. So when it came to the editing of the movie, I really got how, people had a problem with it. I didn't understand why they had so much of a problem, because I didn't feel it was so bad that I was lost outside of the movie. It wasn't so jarring. You still could follow the general gist of the story, and especially, I think especially for me, as someone who knows how difficult it is to get a lot of things into a very, like a screenplay is what, like you have 100 and something pages, and you've got a short time, and then you've got to edit it down, especially like the Hollywood movies and the demands they make on you for the time constraints you have within which to be able to tell stories that possibly need more time to be told. They need you probably need 4 hours to tell a really, really excellent Batman v Superman story. And so I got where the critics were coming from with the editing. But one thing I did enjoy about the editing, because they said it kept going from place to place to place to place. And one thing I thought that was really good about it was that if you saw the way it unfolded and the way the story unfolded, even in the theatrical version, more so in the director's cut of it, it really was like a graphic novel, a DC graphic novel coming to life. And I'd never seen that before cinematically. I really had not seen that before cinematically. Even in The Dark Knight, it still was adapting. It was close, but it was adapting material from a film, from a comic book, and translating it into film language. I felt like almost what Zack Snyder was doing was literally taking the pages of his own Elseworld story of the DC characters. And for any of those who don't know what an Elseworld is, an Elseworld in DC Comics is kind of like a what if in Marvel Comics, and essentially what that is where you take the characters, the normal DC characters like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, but you slightly change the reality that they live in, so you can tell these kind of strange, stories, alternate world stories of how things might be if they were inhabiting a slightly different and alternate universal world. And I felt like that was what he was taking, like the most famous one is the Elseworld, is the film that this, the graphic novel that this film is based on, which is The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. So that's what an Elseworld comic is for, or a graphic novel is for anybody who doesn't know or isn't familiar with it. And Zack Snyder really managed to capture that. And I felt the editing almost lent itself to that kind of storytelling that you do find in comic books, where it's like, you know, you go from one page to another page and it just keeps going back in this kind of crescendo, going from one story to another story, to, you know, from Wonder Woman's little patch of the story to Batman's little patch of the story, and bringing all these story elements together until finally they connect into one, you know. And then you had the final kind of payoff at the end. So to me, it was an incredibly effective way of bringing the feel of graphic novels to life in cinematically. But I could understand from the point of a film critic and from the point of the general audience, and the general audience mainly enjoyed this film, by the way, but from the point of the general audience, that they might not have understood that if they'd never read a graphic novel. This was the most expensive, biggest budget film made specifically for fans. And so I understand the editing critique of Batman v Superman, but I also think one has to appreciate that, in fact, what Zack Snyder was trying to do, he was writing a love letter to the DC graphic novels that were kind of dark and a kind of very epic in scale, and brought in all the different characters that they usually bring in. You'll have like one little bit with the Flash, or you might have a little bit with Green Arrow, or a little scene here from Wonder Woman where she pops in, and then, you know, and it's all where, like, you know, maybe they haven't met each other, or maybe they've known each other for years, and there's all these different kind of ways that the Elseworld kind of just takes these iconic characters. And I feel that's incredibly artistic. I don't want to go on too long about this, because let me see how long I've gone on already. But yeah, that is something that you have to take into account when you're judging Batman v Superman. That was what it was trying to do, and I think it did it quite effectively. And the editing lent itself well to that form of storytelling, which isn't the usual kind of editing that you'd have in a movie that was supposed to be, you know, to run like how we expect a movie format to run, essentially. The critics say it's too long. I think it was too long. I agree with them wholeheartedly. I think this film is flawed. I think it's a flawed, fascinating movie. And you're going to hear me say that the flaws are they're very, very noticeable, but at the same time, I think one has to appreciate what the film was trying to do, and most of what it was trying to do, it did quite successfully, I have to say. But even where it failed, you have to appreciate what it was trying to do, which was something that I don't think has been seen cinematically before this time. And I think it was a really, really brave approach to a Hollywood blockbuster, especially. So it was too long, definitely too long. And this is why when people say, "Oh, you should have just released the director's cut in the cinemas," I don't think that would have helped. I think that would have made things worse if they had have released the director's cut in the cinemas. I think people would have been very just, you know. I loved the film. I really, really loved the film. I was entertained from Every bit I watched. And the first one thing, I'm just going to tell you a quick story. When I went to the cinema to watch the movie, the first time I went, I fell asleep. Sorry, the first time I went, I got in after the trailers, and I watched it, and I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is just, you know, because I was out there with knives drawn, waiting to throw the fire on Zack Snyder as well, because I was just like, I hate you after what you did with Man of Steel, what you did to Superman, and all the critics are saying this is terrible, and I know this is terrible. You've done it again, you've done it again, and I'm sitting there watching this movie with a friend of mine, and I'm just saying, like, looking at him, and I'm like, and he doesn't even like comic book movies. This guy didn't even like comic book movies at all. He hates them. Or not hates them, he just is really, really indifferent to them. I'm sitting there like, when is this film gonna get bad? I'm looking at him like, when is this film gonna get bad? And he's looking at me and said, this is supposed to be a bad movie? And he's like, no, I think it's all right. And we watched it to the end, and both of us came out of the cinema, and he was like, yeah, I don't really like it, but I don't like comic book movies in general, but as it goes, I don't see it as a bad movie. I thought it was, entertaining for what it was. I'm not interested in the subject matter. And I was like, wow, that's an excellent comic book movie. That's one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen. I can't believe Zack Snyder made a movie I like outside of Watchmen. And I thought, the only reason he made Watchmen good is because he basically just ripped it straight from the comic. And I like the comic, so I like the film. And the visuals were amazing. So I didn't understand what people's problem was. And then I went to watch it a second time. And this time I went to watch it with the trailers from the beginning. And I was still enjoying the film. But by the end of it, last 20 minutes, probably one of my favorite bits, when the Trinity are fighting together, I'd fallen asleep. And I was enjoying it, and I'd fallen asleep. It was too goddamn long. It was too goddamn long. And I think if they really, really wanted to do it, I don't know how they could have done this, but if they wanted to release like the 3-hour version of it, I think they should have just done it 2 parts. I can't think of any other way they could have released that 3-hour version. Just done it in 2 parts, and leave it at that, because I thought the 3-hour version, the director's cut, I love it. Every moment of it, I watch it, I love it, but usually I have to watch it in 2 parts because I get a little bit tired watching the movie. And that's the honest truth, even to the Batman v Superman fans. That's my honesty. I told you I'm going to shoot from the hip. I'm going to be real in this video, and I'm being real. So that's the editing, okay? There were problems with it, okay? But this is why I'm going to explain why this movie isn't 27%, okay? It's not a bad movie, and it's better than Civil War. See, the thing is, I fall asleep with Civil War, and I'm not even enjoying the movie. That's the difference. Long movie. I think about the same runtime. Okay, so here's the next argument from the critics. This film has no humor, and it's too dark. Not enough action. Well, Kurt Russell, what do you have to say about that? Exactly. Okay, so to be honest, right, like the no humor, too dark, and not enough action. This one really angered me because if you're going to be critical of a film, I'm not going to go into Schindler's List. This film never suggested it's going to be light and humorous and funny. There was nothing in the, I mean, apart from when they started making them feel fear that if they didn't have a little bit of humor peppered in here and there, that you know, people weren't going to respond well to the trailers and not come to the movie. So they put in a couple of jokes which were bad and shouldn't have probably been in the film because they were distracting. And I think actually Lex Luthor brought enough humor to the movie anyway. But anyway, forget about that. But this angered me because I don't go to a film like Schindler's List and start saying, well, you know, I don't like that movie because it's too dark and it's too realistic and it's got no humor. The reason I don't do that is because Schindler's List didn't say that it was supposed to be light-hearted. It never, you know, presented itself as to be something full of humor. So why would you be critical of a movie for not having a light enough tone to it? As a critic, it doesn't make any sense. You criticize a movie for what it's trying to be and show how through what it's trying to be, it fails. You don't criticize a movie for what you, as an audience member, or you as a you know, as a film critic, want it to be. And as for not enough action, the action in this movie is far superior to Civil War. The action in Civil War is so cartoonish, so over the top, you know, just ridiculously moronic, and yet has no stakes. You know, no one dies, no one, you know, not that I'm saying anyone should die, I'm just saying, like, I'm comparing the way the action works. You know, the action in Batman v Superman makes sense, it's grounded, and it's brutal. There's not one action scene in in Civil War that has a I'm sorry, you can say that big action scene with Ant-Man, and I loved when Ant-Man grew big as well, and I loved when seeing Spider-Man get in the mix with, you know, Captain America and all those guys. But you know, there's not one action scene that can hold a candle to that Batman scene in the warehouse, and everyone knows it. Everyone knows it, right? There's no action scene that can hold a candle to the Batman, you know, in the Batmobile, just mowing through cats, driving through boats, just amazing action, incredible action. And what I appreciate about the distinction between the action, and I'm not saying I did not enjoy the action in Civil War. Do not get me wrong with what I'm saying. I'm saying the action in Batman v Superman is more sophisticated, it's more intelligent, it's more visceral, and therefore I enjoy it more. The action for me in The Dark Knight is better than Civil War. You know, it's more stylized in Batman v Superman, and yet at the same time more grounded. Look at how Batman faces Doomsday in the movie. Look at the difference between how Batman has to respond to Doomsday, to the threat of Doomsday, in comparison with how you know, the Avengers in Captain America Civil War, they respond to each other. Like, everyone can somehow take on everyone, you know. It's just completely ridiculous. Like, you've got humans, like human level characters like Hawkeye, and that dumb bird character, I don't know what his name is, Anthony Mackie. You've got someone like even Ant-Man is kind of strangely, I don't know why his power of getting small is so effective. Or Black Widow is the one that pisses me off the most. I mean, this is a human woman, okay? And this is nothing against women. Obviously, you can be very tough, and if you're trained well enough, you could take down most any man. But when these characters start going up against Vision, doing shit against essentially a being who is on the same level as Superman, and these guys can fight them somehow. How? When she's going up against the Chitauri, an alien force that is from space, and somehow taking shots at Loki. It's all of this stuff, all of this cartoonish things where I know what it is. I know exactly what it is. It's like the actors are like, oh, in my contract, I want my character to be cool, because that's going to help my film career. It's the same thing as with the guy who played Hawkeye, who's one of the most boring characters in comic book history, and in the films is one of the most boring characters. And he's like, oh, I want more time. I should be given more lines. I want more lines of these jokes so that my character can develop, because that's what character development is, saying, funny jokes, having little lines of dialogue, that little zingers or whatever. That's to them what character development is. So he says, I'm sure this is why that all of them are so spectacular in their action scenes, no matter what. They say, oh, I want to be able to, we all have to be able to take shots at each other, no matter what kind of power level we are. It's like somehow Black Widow can take on, Iron Man somehow. I don't know how, but she can do it, or Spider-Man. Or Paul Rudd can, Ant-Man can hang with Spider-Man, even though Spider-Man's, got all kinds of powers that shouldn't allow that to happen. It's too cartoonish and unrealistic, and also there's no stakes. They're not even, essentially it's a sparring match. They're not even trying to hurt each other. The whole thing is absolutely absurd. And then these guys come in. I'm sorry, I'm going to go into this more in the Civil War part of where I go into why I think the 10 reasons I think Civil War is not as good a movie. It's completely overrated, completely overzealous. The way the critics are pouring on accolades to this movie. So they're going on about this accord that they have, where the government are concerned about them, the way they're using their powers and how they're irresponsible with using their powers. And basically, in this half-hour long, I don't know how long it is, 26 minutes or something like that, sparring match that these superpowered beings have with each other, they just destroy a whole airport. Somewhere in the world, they just destroy a whole airport in a sparring match. They're not even trying to hurt each other. They're not facing a bad guy even. As much as I hate the Man of Steel, at least Superman, when he was just destroying public property and killing people in the process, but was actually trying to save the world from a villain. These guys are just fighting each other. They don't think, maybe we shouldn't throw a plane at the other person because somebody built that plane and it's not our property to destroy. They all should have been arrested for vandalism. Essentially, they all committed criminal acts. They just took buses and whatever it was and threw it at each other. Now, am I saying they shouldn't have had a fight in an airport, and maybe if one of them got thrown in to a car or something like that, That's absolutely fine. There was nobody in the airport, as far as I know. I don't know why there was nobody in the airport, but that's absolutely fine if they got thrown in. But they're literally taking stuff and throwing it and purposely destroying public or private property after they've just been told by the government, and Tony Stark is championing this idea that they should be that they should have some kind of limitations or restrictions on what they do, and they're just going around destroy. And it's not like it's the Captain America side that's doing it. It's the Tony Stark side that's doing it. They're just going around just destroying something that isn't theirs. So anyway, it's all cartoonish, ridiculous. The logic is completely off. It makes no sense. And if you want to nitpick, you can see how I just nitpicked, because I could have just sat there during Civil War and been thinking about all these things rather than sit down and just try and enjoy the bloody movie, which is what I actually tried to do, even though I didn't enjoy it that much. But I actually sat down and I attempted to try and enjoy it and ignore all these things that were niggling in my head, and I was thinking, what? That doesn't. Why do they all have the same superpowers? I thought, they all seem to be like agility, and why is it that somehow all of them seem to be able to take on Vision, even though he's like this completely OP, overpowered kind of being? Why is it that, I sat there and I still just tried to sit down and take the characters in and enjoy the movie. You guys that are on the other side, the Marvel side, or the Batman fans, and I'm not just saying it's Marvel fans, it's the Batman fans, you sit down and you watch Batman vs Superman and you want to tear it apart, everything, because you're scared of other DC characters. Like the Batman friends are scared of other DC characters because they always want Batman to be the number one DC character, and the Marvel fans are scared of all the DC characters because they always want Marvel to be the number one, comic book movie making company, Disney Marvel. So anyway, that's my side of that. Cartoonish as hell, and the difference is, if the Marvel guys had have directed the Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Doomsday fight, they would have had Batman, because Batman's the most popular character, and how they treat Iron Man. Somehow Iron Man can take out the Hulk for some reason. I don't know how he can take out the Hulk like that, but he can take out the Hulk. So they would have had Batman somehow, be able to take down Doomsday, and he's got some weird kind of thing where he'll be able to do that. But in the what Zack Snyder did is he treated the action scenes with a certain amount of respect and logic, and showed that, okay, there are limitations to Batman. He cannot just take out anyone and do anything he wants the way somehow. I don't know how, but now Iron Man is just so OP. He can take out Hulk. He can go toe to toe with Thor. All of these guys he could do these things with. He's so OP, and so is Captain America. To be quite frank, I didn't know, like in the comics, Captain America can be holding helicopters. Like he's only supposed to be like a little bit stronger than human beings, like your average athletic human being. He's not supposed to be able to like grab He's not like the Hulk or Spider-Man. Spider-Man's supposed to be stronger than Captain America. But anyway, forget all that. That's all nonsense anyway to be talking about. That's getting into nerdy stuff, and it's nitpicking the way you guys usually do. So anyway, that's the first part of my rant. So we're going to go into 3. Depiction of Superman is bad. He kills. Does he? Now, I've not appreciated what Zack Snyder has done with Superman. I think I've been very vocal on the fact that I don't really like Batman. Sorry, I don't. I really don't like Man of Steel. I think it's an awful, awful movie, and I think that's what began this terrible slide into what has been a depiction of Superman, which I'm very, very uncomfortable with. The movie broke my heart many times, as Superman is probably my favorite superhero. I kind of like the Trinity equally. It's hard for me to pick whether Wonder Woman or Superman or Batman. I like them quite equally. But when Superman said, I might have to kill Batman, I might have to kill him, and then said the words, not everyone, I can't remember the exact quote, but he says, eventually everyone turns bad or something, or eventually everyone's corrupted. No, Superman, you're goddamn Superman. You don't say that. And these are the things where the film itself opened itself up to kind of critic. Because you want Superman to be the hope of the movie. You know, even if you want it to be realistic, I get that, Zack Snyder, but you want Superman to be kind of hopeful in this movie. So don't think for one moment those who have issue or take issue with this movie, I don't see some of what you're saying. I see a lot of what you're saying with Batman v Superman, much more than I do with Suicide Squad. So the depiction of Superman is bad. I want to say one thing though about the bit where he supposedly kills a guy in Batman v Superman. Now he says in the next scene that he didn't kill anyone there. I don't know if he says he's not killing the terrorists or if he says he didn't kill anybody there. But I feel from that scene that we should probably give Superman the benefit of the doubt, because what he does is he moves so fast through that wall that I imagine he could have protected and shielded the terrorist that he smashes through the wall. Maybe he just wanted to give him a real fright, to be like, hey, you know, I'll fuck you up if I want to, if you're messing with my girl. And he may have smashed with his back through those walls rather than smash the guy face first into those walls. Because I would be very uncomfortable if Superman really did just smash the guy through the wall. I've never known. I'd like to ask Zach what his interpretation of that scene was. So on number 3, I'm with fans and critics. I do not enjoy the depiction of Superman. But what I would say is that does not make this a bad movie. Just because the Superman in this movie is not the ideal Superman that I want, I am not going to criticize the film on what I wanted it to be. I'm going to be critical and review the film on what it was trying to be itself. And I believe that what this was trying to do was a deconstruction of Superman, of the kind of perfectness of this character, that he could be this beacon of goodness in the world. They were trying to show a flawed a man with a great deal of power and the struggles that he would have to go through. So in terms of the depiction of Superman, I think it served the film that Zack Snyder was trying to make. So I'm not too difficult on that, even though it's not my Superman, and I would have preferred a slightly more heroic Superman. So I'll give you guys that. The Superman was not the greatest. Too many characters in the movie. I don't think there were too many characters. I followed the characters quite easily. I followed the story arcs quite easily, even in the theatrical version. I think it's nitpicking again by the critics. I don't see the real problem. How were there too many characters? It was Batman, it was Superman, a few cameos here and there, Wonder Woman cameo. Wonder Woman was brilliant. badass. Really enjoyed every moment she was on screen. What's with the too many characters? Explain to me. Number 5, Lex Luthor. Bad casting.